Good morning.
Good morning.
Today's date is May 27th, 2008. My name is Tyrone Belanger. Today I will be conducting an oral history interview with Eugene Sakshaug for the Veterans History Project in partnership with the Dalton Council on Aging. This interview is being held at the Dalton Community Television Studio in Dalton, Massachusetts. Good morning, Gene.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning.
How are you today?
Well, I'm better than I have been.
Good.
Yeah.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name?
I'll do that. It's Eugene C. Sakshaug. It's S-A-K-S-H-A-U-G.
Where do you presently live?
In Lanesboro, Massachusetts. If you want a housing address, I have one of those too. I don't.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
What is your date of birth and where were you born?
My date of birth is October 18, 1923, and I was born in Mandan, North Dakota.
Did you grow up and go to school there?
Yes, indeed. Went to Mandan was considered a pretty big town, and I went out in the suburbs. But a school was a one-room school, and not very much larger on any part of it.
That was the grammar school?
Mm-hmm.
In high school?
Well, I went to high school in Flasher, North Dakota. It's a small town too, and I went to high school there. And it turned out I was valedictorian of my class, and that made me feel pretty proud.
Well, you should be being valedictorian.
Yeah, it was good.
That's great. What was life like growing up at that time during the Depression?
It all depended on how you made it, I reckon. It was interesting, but there wasn't a lot to do because you didn't have any outlet for going place to place except horses, because we just ran out of gas, especially the younger folks. They just couldn't afford to have an automobile or use one. There were plenty of horses, and they used the horses. It's kind of reverse of what we have now.
That was your mode of travel, was horseback?
Yeah, young fellas, mode of travel, just didn't have anything. Well, there were some few guys that had horses, but or rather that had old Model T Fords. They staged real, what would you call it? Using something over again is what I'm getting at. They had a lot of old Model Ts, and they'd drive them until they dropped, and then they'd get them something else.
I imagine they were pretty old too, you know.
Oh yeah, most of those were 1916, 1918. I think the last ones of the Model T, I'm no expert on cars, but I think the oldest, or the ones that were in vogue at that time at least, were about 1920.
What did you do during the Depression while you were growing up, as to like this? You went to school and all. Did you work at all, or your father?
Yeah, my dad was a farmer, and he farmed as well as he could. During some of those years, we had a depression that it was coincided with just a plain drought, and
so the crops weren't very well in some years.
Yeah, they were very difficult to make things go, but so we would work for anybody that had. I worked for 50 cents a day in some cases, and sometimes as high as $1.50. But and for men, full-grown, good, strong men, 50 cents or $1.50 was not unreasonable.
Do you recall what you did at any of these jobs?
Sure. We pitched hay, or the chief occupation was handling hay, because again, you didn't have much handwritten to do any, or non-handwritten.
Yeah.
We had not much of, because well, machinery was just not in very good usage at that time.
I imagine that you had much machinery at that time.
No, not so. I mean, it's correct. It was not so much material. We had some machinery in our backyard, though that I don't know how in the world it ever got there. Before I was born, and we used to throw water in places where it had oilers and so on. You know, little kids were messing around, having a ball, and when the Second World War started, so I never thought that thing would run. You know, that machine, that tractor, but when that war started, I don't know, 3-4 men came, and they spent a few days with that rascal, and by golly, it started up and it drove it off.
Really?
That's all there was to it. You know, it was a miracle. That's what it was. Yeah. And,
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
you betcha. There were 9 of us altogether, and it takes a little time sometimes for me to count them up with any accuracy, but there were 7 boys and 2 girls in the family, and there are still 4 of us left in the
Still left
group.
in the family?
Yeah. But,
Did any of your brothers or sisters serve in the military during World War II?
oh yeah, there we had 1, 2, 3, 4 active military people. Not one of them was in Alaska, and he spent the whole war basically up in
Stayed in Alaska?
Yeah, and then toward the end, he was a crew chief for a general. I could think of his name for a little while, but I don't have it. But he was a crew chief for a general, and he rode with him for quite a few places in the country.
Oh, really?
Yes, he's a pretty fair size. His name is commonplace in nuts. I get sometimes.
It's all right.
It's too much, and but it was commonplace. That name was, and he was a good passenger. Lawrence liked him real well. He got to go to some interesting places. It worked out just
So that was a nice. That was nice. Good
yeah,
duty.
Yeah, it happened occasionally. Yeah.
You had a couple other brothers that were in the service?
Yeah, one of them just younger than him. He was in the islands and some of the more remote, well, some of the Philippine islands he was
in the
in.
Philippines?
Yeah, and his oldest, there's the one just older than him. He was didn't get in the quarreling at all. He volunteered to be
In the infantry?
what he was trying to do was become an air flyer.
Oh, pilot.
Yes, and he did some of the preliminary work. There were several such bases in the country.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened to them as happened to those several other ones. They just shut them off because they said, we got plenty of flyers right now, and we're not going to spend the time and money doing any more. So they were left with quite a bunch of people who did things, that were trying things. And one of them was they'd put him on oh goodness gracious, rotating kind of a arm that would rotate at various speeds until they could see how big how rough a characteristic a man could.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of
the words that go with it. I can't.
The words that go with it. But
think of them offhand either. But he got so he would give them readings on what they could do and how much a man could do, and he also did that with heat, and they wanted to find out how fast a guy could rotate and how much he could stand doing those two things simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I don't know, he could have it. As far as I'm concerned, pretty.
He never got to go overseas, though, right?
No. He was just released completely before long.
And your sisters didn't go into the military?
No, they didn't.
What did your father do for a living? We mentioned that he was a farmer.
Yeah, he was a farmer, and he farmed in good shape. And till 1932, we moved to a different place from where we were moving, and I wrote a little history of our family, and I pointed out it's the worst time to move. They would have picked it because this was just an atrocious time to move.
Really?
From there on, we never had a crop hardly. It's terrible. And Bob was always worked somewhat in politics, in low level politics. Yeah. But it was big enough so that he put in made it be known that he would like to be considered for a job of grading roads. Even pretty good roads were done with gravel, and they'd run the gravel road down and maybe several miles and come back and so on.
He wanted a job to maintain or help maintain the roads?
Yeah, and he managed to keep us alive, as a matter of fact, because, boy, I'm telling you, it was touch and go, I think. I never had it happen to me, thank God, but I know that very small wages were very useful, and he managed to keep that job right along, and what he could make as a farmer, he added to that and managed to scrape out a living during that.
Well, he had to have a couple of jobs to feed 7 young people growing up.
Well, we never had them all at once. Ma used to have a great ambition that she was going to get all 9 of us in a picture sometime, but she never made it.
She never
made it.
Was your father a veteran?
No, he was not. He's not.
You graduated from high school, right?
Yes.
We mentioned that you were the valedictorian.
Yeah.
What did you do after you finished high school? Did you work for a while, or?
Yeah, I worked here and there for anybody doing almost anything that was legal, but we finally, he got a job, I got a job, doing general farm work, pitching hay, pitching straw and so on.
And this was to help out the family?
Yeah. There was two things for that. Ma was insistent that I go to college.
Go to college.
And so the money that I earned, I saved, just spent very, very little of it. And it worked out at the end of the year, year and 3 or 4 months. Came out to be $300. And went down to North Dakota State University, and I was horrified to find that they needed money. My God, they wanted $30 for
Room and board?
no, for
Tuition?
tuition.
Tuition.
Yeah, and had to buy my own room and board. Another guy and I used the same room, and to the horror of lots of people, but foolishly, they two men slept in the same bed.
Well,
one of the things
you had to do what you had to do.
it, sure.
And that, I imagine that cut down on the expenses.
Oh my, yes, very good.
You know, it's really funny. You say it was $30 for tuition.
Yeah.
I mean, but back then it was very, very little, because I know today tuition is
Yeah.
terrible. But,
Terrible.
do you remember what year, that one year that you went to college?
Yeah, it was 1940.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
1940.
1940 through 41?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now you went into the military after college, right?
Well, I made a deal. My folks were very much against my going into college, and the deal I finally made with them was that I would. The war had started, see,
Yeah.
and they said, okay, if you go through this first year and say that you still want to go, we'll do it. And so they let me sign the papers. At that moment, it was still, you had to touch and go whether you did or did not have to have a
Signature?
signature. But at any rate, we made it so that it was
It
all
was
right.
legal? It was all right for you?
Yeah, and we lived through that first year, and then did not go back
school.
for another year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and came back 7 years later to tidy it up.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Enlisted.
You enlisted at that time.
Yeah.
Where did you enlist?
Well, it's funny when I had gone to Minneapolis. I thought I would go down there, and because they were acting too slowly in Fargo, and so I started with that in mind, that we'd have something faster than that. And now that I had a signature and all that stuff, and so we, a friend of mine, Gooch Hancock, he and I went. We decided we would go and enlist in Fargo. And then we again came up the same thing, and we decided, well, we'd go to Minneapolis. And they took our papers in Minneapolis and put us in their statistics, but we never were anything in Minneapolis except
How did you get to Minneapolis?
hitchhike.
You hitchhiked?
Yeah.
How many days did it take? Do you remember?
No, hitchhiking wasn't such a bad deal. A good determined man could run to Minneapolis in a day.
Really?
Sometimes less than a day. It was about 400 or 500 miles, and you get a good truck that's moving right along. Well, you gobble up most of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, what branch of the service did you join?
I joined the U.S. Marine Corps.
Thank you. Semper Fi. How old were you when you entered the service? When you went
Well, when I first started bugging them, and where I first got my name on a piece of paper, I was I was 17, I suppose. And by the time I really got some action, when Ma was willing to sign some papers, Ma and Pa, I was 18.
You were 18 when you went. So you were 17 in your first year of college?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Wow.
I have to run that through my head a few times, but I think that's correct.
That's quite an accomplishment to get out of high school and go through your 1 year of college by the time you're 18.
Yeah, I was 18, sure enough, and the next year would have been 19.
Great.
I think.
What were your dates of service? Do you remember your?
Yeah, October. Let's see, it was 3rd of October.
Was June?
I think so. It's 3rd of June.
3rd of June.
June, yeah. 3rd of June, that's right.
In 1942.
1942.
And you got out June
10th, I think.
of 1949?
Yeah,
You had 7 years in the service.
right. Yeah.
Why, I want to ask you, why you joined the Marine Corps? Why did you pick the Marine Corps as your branch of service?
I think as long as I was part of the service, I'd try to make it the best one it was.
You're right.
Was the Marine Corps.
You're right. Was there anything else about the Marine Corps that you liked, that drew you?
Oh, it was just, the Marine Corps was just one of those things that it lived up to most of its billing, if not all of it. And that billing was being pretty prideful about the Marine Corps. I was in operation.
You mentioned one other thing I'm going to remind you. You mentioned something about the uniform.
Aha. The uniform looked mighty classy. The unfortunate fact of it was that I think I wore my blue uniform 3 times in his lifetime.
You joined for that uniform and you only got to wear it
3 times. I tried it on just the other day.
Really?
Some of my kids could have tried it on, but not me. It was entirely too much jean to get in there.
You expanded a little bit?
I expanded, yes.
Now, where were you sent for boot camp?
Well, immediately after boot camp, we...
Well, where did you go to boot camp first?
Oh, where did we go to boot camp first?
Remember?
Yeah, sure. It was Camp Pendleton. Yeah, it was the boot camp.
San Diego, I think.
Yeah, San Diego. I'm sorry.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah, San Diego, and it was this boot camp was located in well, you're right.
Yeah. Now, do you remember any of your training or experiences during boot camp?
Oh yeah, yeah. We most of the training we had was, of course, close order drill and some open order drill, and then it was mostly most of these exercises were with rifles, and we used the rifles for firing and at targets and various, or firing not only in targets as you think of them, but in moving targets and so on.
Yeah. You mentioned that you qualified or you fired a couple different rifles, the Springfield.
Yes. Yeah, we were able to handle the 1903 Springfield, which was a bolt-action rifle, and then we did some work with automatic rifles, Browning. Yeah, that was much less than in the Marine Corps. Then in the bolt action.
Yeah.
That bolt action was a wonderful rifle.
Accurate?
Oh yes, it was very good. I thought it was just an excellent rifle.
Yeah. Was it hard to adjust? Are you going from some civilian life into the military, into boot camp? Was it hard to adjust to that type of a life?
It all depended. There were times when it was a little bit hard to adjust, but I've been, by that time, here and there, a year away at college, and working for farmers for another year and so on. So I was no longer totally adjusted to be, or required to be home at night and that sort of thing. And I wasn't afraid of any problems that would rise.
You had been on your own for on and off, so.
Yeah, for a couple of years
Yeah.
at least, yes.
How long was boot camp, basic training, do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was 3 months.
12 weeks, yeah, yeah, you mentioned 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of your instructors, any of your drill instructors?
I can picture them, but I can't remember them anymore. That's just too long. I used to remember some of those guys, and I think I might have mentioned one the day I made some inventory with you. I think there was one I remembered. But,
Nicoli?
yeah, Nikolai.
Or Nikolai?
Yeah, Nikolai. Yeah, and he was a good Marine. He taught us all kinds of good stuff. And but I can't remember the lines. I can see that guy who was our senior boot camp drill instructor. He's just a splendid-looking Marine. I felt very proud to be
in his unit?
Yeah.
How many men did you, do you remember how many men you had in your platoon in boot camp?
Generally, it was 60, I think.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Yeah, I think that was about the basic
Yeah.
number of men that they had.
Yeah.
Now, when you graduated from boot camp,
Yeah.
how did you feel? You know,
I felt like
knowing that you finished the training
yeah.
and now you're a Marine.
Yeah. I felt just about like that I was a Marine and was prepared to cope with just about anything in the line of military duty, and was happy to be in that shape.
You were confident.
Yeah, felt good.
Yeah. Did you get a furlough right after boot camp?
No.
You didn't get any?
It might have been that we didn't really have a full uniform when I got out of double. They were shoes, for instance. We wore shoes that we brought from home for quite a long time. I think we had them worn out pretty well by the time the boot camp was done. But
oh, really? They didn't give you?
For some time we didn't have any shoes because they didn't make enough shoes, you know. And I don't know how long it was that we went without shoes, but it was a while.
Well, I didn't realize, but now I understand. I mean, I'm thinking back there that there were thousands and thousands of men going through boot camp.
Oh,
so they
yeah.
couldn't keep up with the.
The other uniform piece we had was a pith helmet. Pulled that down on my head, and I thought it looked pretty funny, but it worked. It did the trick. It kept the sun off your head, which was something. So.
Yeah. All right. So where did you report to next after boot camp?
We after boot camp we went up to Logan, Utah. It's kind of a strange thing, but we went up to Logan, Utah, where was located the University of Utah, and we were. There were just a few of us out of that we met during that time, and we were just met with a group of men from outside, or from inside. It was in the Corps, and they were setting out to teach us something about radio. which most of us didn't know hardly anything except to turn that switch, you know, and when we had the batteries that were working. And so that was about our experience. But we were required to go because he said, well, I didn't have any idea I was going to do anything except what do you call it, when you fight with a rifle.
You thought you were going to be an infantry?
Infantry, that's it. I didn't hear the word. And by golly, I kept trying to get transferred to be an infantryman. And I finally went to a man who took care of those things in Utah, because they kept passing me by. You know, they didn't know what to do with this nut. And so I came up to him, and I told him. He said, "Well, you're in a platoon now," and I said, "No, that's not what I want." He said, "Who the hell do you think you are?" He says, "There are all kinds of men that would like to go one place or another with the Corps, but," he said, "you come in here and you teach us that you start no men, people about." He says, "Forget it. Get in there and make a Marine out of yourself." And that was the end of it. From then on, I figured he was absolutely right. It's pretty insignificant man to demand special treatment.
Yeah. So now you were at University of Utah State. You went into radios. Then you mentioned that you went further on and you started into radar?
Yes. We started with radar in a sense. The people there wouldn't even talk about it if they knew anything about it. They just concentrated on radio, but they were chosen for the fact that they were adept at some of the signals or some of the work that they would run into in radar work. And so they were chosen each time that a group would graduate from boot camp, and there was a lot of guys. Jeez, I don't know how many there were, a few thousand each week, it seemed like. Maybe yeah. I shouldn't say few, but at least 1,000. And of that whole group, they'd only choose some small numbers, you know.
A few out of that?
Yeah, out of the whole group, see. And they'd make us, or they'd pull us in there for seeing if they're accurate, if their work was accurate enough.
Yeah.
And that's where the big George came in telling us that we were no longer in charge of our destiny. But it was a good job. The people they checked out with were usually pretty successful to them. They were sharp guys.
Now, while you were at the University of Utah State, besides going to school, you know, and training and all, what else did you do? You mentioned something about a sport.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we, he's, you know, young men, and we had to play a little football because it was fall, and so we did the best we could. Remember, we won 3 and lost 3, but when we played a good ball club, we lost some ferocious numbers because we weren't really, well, it was terrible. We only would practice for an hour, you know, every now and then.
You didn't get a chance to practice as much as the other. Yeah.
Not nearly.
But that's quite an experience, though, playing for the Marine Corps.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed that. Once they learned that we could actually play toward the end of the season, we had some fans that show up.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, when you were all done at Utah State, this was in January of 1943. I think you were just about done there. You said you were going to Corpus Christi, Texas.
That's correct.
But between then, did you get leave? You mentioned something about you got some time off.
Yeah, 10 days or something like that.
Yeah, 10 days?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you get a chance to come home?
Yes, I came home that time.
Did you?
Yeah. And spent about 3 days or 4 days at home because trains were the only things you could go in. And they weren't very fast at that time.
How did you feel when you come home wearing a uniform?
Oh boy. I thought it was something else. Yeah.
Then you went back down to, Texas, Corpus Christi. And now, what did you do there?
In Corpus Christi, we first really attacked the problem of radar, radio detection and ranging, and that's what radar meant, R-A-D-A-R, and they started with us to see if we could master this material that they would be throwing at us. As a matter of fact, I had passed one piece of
Equipment?
Yeah, we were in the. We had to take an exercise every week. At the end of the week, they'd see if we knew what was going on. Well, they went by a couple of times on that, and they pulled me out of the thing, and told me that I didn't have to go there anymore. Go in the one that had exercised ahead of the one that we were on, and so I did, and they told me they would pay a corporal's pay, which was very good, boy. And
so you made corporal?
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Oh yeah, it had to be.
And there were just a few of us that happened to, but the reason it happened was clear. We just finished up with a course in college. Of exercises well, it's what you do when you learn how to pump water and do all the things that you do and find out why they work in actuality. And so we were very well equipped. Those of us that passed that, there were only a few of us, half a dozen or so. We passed up a few more.
So you picked up the electronics of the radar very easily.
More than most, because we had so much background material and fresh background material, and so it turned out to be a pretty slick deal for us. We, after a few, after ways, we became corporals, and we got paid more, and we thought that was really great stuff.
Well, I can imagine. You know, any little bit helps.
Yeah.
Now, after you were all done with your training, basically at in Corpus Christi, in December, where you mentioned you were transferred again in December of '43 to the East Coast.
Yeah, that's some of those dates.
Yeah, I mean the dates
kind of wild, but they're roughly
close as we can remember.
Sure, and we were sent to from Corpus Christi. That is, in Corpus Christi, we learned our first stuff about radar, and And some of the methods they used for teaching guys, even though they were dealing with pretty sharp guys, were a miracle to see.
Yeah.
They would take a piece from a radar set, and they used radio tubes and vacuum tubes and all that sort of thing. And they would take one of those tubes and make you decide each thing that went in that tube and what came out and what it looked like on an oscilloscope and all that stuff. You do that all the way through, and it was quite an experience to see something taken apart that way. But it was fairly effective, I think.
But that was still in Corpus Christi, right?
Yes, that was in Corpus.
So then after Corpus Christi,
Yeah.
you said you were transferred to the East Coast.
Yeah, that was part of their plan. Part of the Marine Corps plan.
You went to Cherry Point, was it?
Yeah, Cherry Point.
The Navy the Air Naval Station. Right?
Yes, it was a brand new station, evidently, because there was very little grass growing. Even there was a lot of gravel areas, and
So everything was new. They were probably building up
yeah,
during the war, for the war.
you bet they were. It turned out that was a powerful station for Marines
Yeah.
and aviation, Marine Corps aviation.
Now, do you remember what your unit was? What your unit was called?
What they used to call those groups was once they settled on a name, was they were Marine Air Control groups. Yeah, and that was the same kind of the same kind of what was done in the aviation part of the aviation, and it's their function was to form up into squadrons and operate with airplanes.
Yeah.
To knock down other airplanes and so on.
And your group was
To
involved
control
with the radar part of
Yeah,
it.
and ours was to control them, and that was it was kind of a thing that was very remarkable. They claimed that in England that was some guys used to claim that was responsible for finally calling off the air program of the Nazis. They'd come over and they lost so many planes. It got to be a real drag on what they could produce and what they could keep in the air. And they did that primarily because of the accuracy that they finally attained with their night fighters to go out and knock these planes down. And
That's because of the radar?
Yeah, they could. What they would do, it was simple-minded way, and not simple-minded by a long shot, but they were able to fly far enough, and they actually started using some putting in gasoline, and so that they were ready to fly.
Yeah.
And they'd fly all kinds of maneuvers because they knew that they were not going to get shot at until they got over England, and then they were all out. But they had enough material, enough gasoline and
fuel,
all that sort of thing And they were so much better off than the Germans were, because the Germans had to prowl around and look to see who was in the sky, you know. And that was bad news, because they generally find out too late that somebody was shooting at them. And so it was a terrible advantage that they had.
Now, when you were at Cherry Point, you said you were going back and forth. You were going back to down to Camp Murphy in Florida.
We did that. They got us into a program for not movable means, but fixed radar, so that they could use more accuracy and more and just simply a better arrangement in a lot of. See, if I remember this right, I don't want to run into some of those guys I used to know, but what they had was little packages, and they carried them under the wing, I think they were, and they just simply didn't have very much range. 20 miles is considered quite a lot of range. It was. That was something you could do some good in 20.
Even 20 miles, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a big help. But the chain home low, as they call it, was a thing that could go out over 100 miles even then, and that really gave them a horrible. They entered the picture when those guys were just about exhausted from flying over London, or trying to fly over London. In the meantime, our guys were standing just ready to go, and they'd collapse. And with those, they didn't run out of gas.
And all this radar equipment helped out with all this?
All of it. It was tremendous. That was
so you were basically involved with the radar, Marine Corps radar anyway, from the beginning.
Yeah,
and you just worked along with the advancement of the radar as the war went along?
That's right. That is right. Those planes were that we got from our people were two groups. One of them was a group that was being pushed around by people from the United States and people from England, all of them to go together to improve their techniques and so on. And they had other segments of the operation in some labs in the United States to improve the accuracy and improve the ability for longer flights and so forth, and or longer radar, longer, well, forget it. As they wanted to make what it really turned out to be. You probably cover this and you say, why didn't they shut up so I can ask some questions, but
no, that's fine.
And then I forgot what I was going to say, so we got to talk anyhow.
That's okay. That's all right. Now listen, after spending all this time on the East Coast, which I think we mentioned, we tried to figure out was about a year's time.
Yeah.
Now in January 1944, you went back to the West Coast, to Camp Pendleton?
Yeah.
And you were getting ready to go overseas?
That is correct. We had, well, they had us there for their own purposes, I'm sure, but they did have us go up some mountains there and see how far we could fly, how far we could learn from our radars, how far apart that we could, how great the range really could be, and we did some of the.
Use the mountains, the high mountains of Camp Pendleton?
Yeah.
If I can remember right, there were some awful big mountains in Camp Pendleton.
They were big ones. Yeah.
Yes.
And it was fun. We'd drive up, and sometimes stay up there on the mountain and learn what we could learn from nothing but height, you know.
Yeah.
And it was quite a lot. It was a pretty big deal.
So this whole process, you're still learning, you're still training.
Yeah.
Now you're about ready to go overseas.
Right.
You know your equipment as well as you can right
Yeah.
now.
That's right.
Now you're headed for the Philippines in January, well, in June. I think June of '44. I think
Yeah.
that's what we got here.
That's probably right.
Now, do you remember going to the Philippines? Do you remember what the ship? If you can't,
No, I can't remember that because what we rode in was mostly LSTs and things
Yeah.
like that. They were not ships with a lot of notoriety about them as a single unit, but it sure was a mess when they an effective mess, I should say. But they did not, as far as I know, anybody, or there might have been somebody who learned the name on it, but I didn't.
Yeah. You really didn't care. It was just.
No.
Now, do you remember how long it took you to get to the Philippines? And did you make any stops in between?
Oh yeah. We went to Hawaii, and we were there for, I don't know, some weeks, I guess. And we went to the Admiralty Islands. That I never mentioned before because I didn't remember it.
Oh yes, you did.
You
Yes,
did.
we got it down here. Yes.
And we actually disembarked there, I believe it was, and set up our equipment. But there was nothing to shoot at by that time. This was after the Mariana turkey shoot. You know, they just blasted them out of the sky.
Yeah.
And so there was not really too many planes that were fighting. Occasionally there was one, but it was not a highly populated area.
So you were basically lucky because most of the islands that you were landing on were already secure.
Yes, indeed. Certainly in that group, in the Admiralty group,
Yeah.
that was well taken care of. And then, after some more this and that, we went to land at the Philippine Islands, and I've given a number there, and I don't remember what it is, but I think it's the early part of 1944,
44.
yeah. And that was, we had to land. There was some fire. The Army infantry and those kinds of operations tried to keep the guys off our backs, and I did pretty well at that. The only thing they had that was kind of bad, there were things that were not right, but right near us geographically was that was military.
The hospital ship.
Hospital
That's what
ships.
yeah.
Hospital ships, and they were close enough to us that the Japanese soon discovered that there was a hospital ship that couldn't move, and it was hung up on
the reef.
Yeah, couldn't get it down, and so they would fire those mortars and land, and they would land most of them right in with the mortars. The only thing that stopped them really was when they'd fire too many of them, or they'd start firing back and try to stop them, and they never did quite get them wholly stopped. At least I didn't think so. They would
They'd probably lift them up, move their motors.
Yeah, and then they'd go and
Set up
again. And I was pretty sure they were using something that was highly movable. And they finally came here after maybe a day or two, about a day, I guess. They finally drove off whoever was
firing the mortars.
Yeah, and got that stopped. And there were a few occasions where there was rough stuff, but most of the stuff that we were engaged in was the gear that we had, and some of that was beat up pretty good. We had lots of cable. You can't imagine how much cable there is with a radar set of primitive design. At least they.
No, I can't. I could not even fathomize how much equipment came into that. You know?
Yeah, there was a slug, and there was big old cables, like that, and you had to identify them, and it was great stuff. And by the time we got that all made right, that is, to do what it was supposed to do, all the planes were practically gone.
So you did all this work
for very little.
Really, but you still had the experience of repairing it and setting it up.
Sure, it was a good experience. Besides that, yeah, and it was what you had to do. I mean, it really came down to something that was not so much more than a high-class maneuver, but people would be some lack of agreement with that if they were shot at very closely.
Yeah.
But we came out of that all right. And
No.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you: while you were in the Philippines, you made tech sergeant, or did you make it before you went over? It's just like,
I don't really know. It's either tech sergeant or master sergeant. One of the two.
You mentioned both of them. I just didn't know
I didn't either.
when you. Now you're in the Philippines for 6. I think we figured out about 6 months.
It could be that would be about long because it took quite a while to get things. And they were trying out a lot of stuff, as well as actually doing. You don't get that many chances to set up and operate and see what you can do. And they set up some outside stations that they had small radars and pick up.
Let me ask you a question. How long did it take to set up one of your radar units? Not a big one or a small, just on an average.
Yeah.
Was it like a day or 2 days?
Yeah.
Or hours?
Well, when we really got to be real sharp with them, and they had smoothed out the bugs in the radars pretty well, and I'm talking about really state-of-the-art stuff in 20 years ago or so, maybe 25. But I think that I used to have guys set those up in, I think it'd be about, if you had everything ready, right? You could be pretty sure that you could start getting data in, I think, 4 hours.
4 hours?
Yeah.
Really? I thought it might.
No, that's different.
It would take days to do something like that.
It's different. There was a large part of that was because the vacuum tubes were smaller, and all parts of it were smaller than they were later on. And transmission cable, we had 4 of them we used, and they were about that size, just about 2 feet square.
Yeah.
And you get everything right so that they would get right in and run some men out just as fast as you could, and start setting them up one on top of the other one, and put an antenna on top of the sucker, and you had her.
They're all ready to go?
Ready to go. Yeah.
Wow.
That was a remarkable trick.
It had to be. I just can't imagine all the the electronics. Like I say, I'm not much with electronics. I'm luckier if I can turn on my computer.
I am too, as a matter of fact. I don't do that very often.
So now, you were there for about 6 months, and you said you went back to Hawaii, or you were going back to Hawaii?
Yeah,
You were sent back to Hawaii for some...
Yeah, that I can't. If I spent a few weeks on that, I could maybe dig it out. But they, well, somehow or another, it seems like, and I could be wrong on that, but I was contacted by somebody that needed me, the brass or whatever, and they made contact with me and a few other guys, and to go back to Hawaii. And as we understood it, it was to be men who were experienced in, even if they weren't as
you were.
Yeah, but it was there, and they sent us. They wanted us to go back to Hawaii, and they made that known to the higher people in our area and similar areas.
Your commanding officers and all.
Yeah, and they then sent us to Hawaii, sure enough. And the object there was to make, use that experience to do some of the things that we wanted to do, and to make sure that they were understood what was necessary. And it was made clear to us, or at least as clear as it gets, that we were going to be used in raiding Japan.
The invasion of Japan.
Yeah, that was what we understood. And there were people from all kinds of operations that were treated in kind of the same way, because they had learned. And so we did that. And if I guess we could have, well, you could see how long that was. We were there quite a ways. And
you were in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Quite a while.
Yeah. And while we were there, we learned how to repair radar sets, of course. Made it better than we were at it. And just learned what the world was like after a few years. And we were happy, however, when they suddenly made us known that the war was not going to be extended.
So you were in Hawaii in August of 1945.
Yeah.
And you were told that the war had ended.
Yes, we got that. Hawaii News and Observer, I think it was, had the front page, and it's done, or something like that, the whole front page. And that came out an extra even.
How did you feel?
Very contented with it.
It had to be, you really weren't going to have to go back over, at least under the aspect of war.
That's right. That's right. No, most of the guys, I think, felt the same way. Do it, what you had to do, and if you didn't have to do it, well, that was good too.
Yeah, you just happened to be lucky,
Yeah.
Which I think I heard that the other day on TV when they were interviewing a World War II veteran, and he says in combat, I think he said, "You're lucky. You have good luck or you're bad luck."
Yeah.
And he said, "I was lucky."
Yeah. I
because
think that's right.
If you're unlucky,
yeah,
then you just didn't make it.
I've read statistics on how many people were in active divisions and actually were shooters and so on. And it depended on where they were and so on. But there were substantial numbers that never did anything like what just the same as we did. They were otherwise occupied.
There was an awful lot of support people you're talking
Yeah,
about. Support people for the
Yeah.
infantry that went into the beaches or
Yeah.
wherever else. Yeah, I know there was an awful lot of people behind
Yeah.
the infantry. Now, the war has ended, basically. Did you come back to the United States? Were you sent back to the United States?
Yeah.
The mainland, I should say.
Yeah, the mainland, yeah. Well, there's some confusion in my mind exactly, but exactly how it came to pass, all this. But they decided they wanted to break up these squadrons,
Yeah.
flying squadrons as well as radar squadrons and all stuff. And ours was ticketed, and I may not have the order exactly right, but ours was ticketed to go back to the United States and to be broken down into smaller units and do what they had to do, including discharging.
I was just going to say, I imagine a lot of the men were
Sure.
being discharged out of the service.
Sure. And we, and that's where I'm kind of mixed up. There's, in that group, we had gone back to,
Camp Pendleton,
no, it had gone back to the
Philippines?
Philippines. That's a little mysterious to me how it came to pass, but I think it was that there was no longer any need, and they had to be. These were higher-ranking enlisted people, and they wanted to use them, I think. And so we got these men back, and then for a reason which never made any sense to me, and doubtlessly somebody thought about it, they decided to go to Guam. And we set up equipment at Guam. And
After the war?
yes, it was after the war. And they were going to make a big air station there, I think, if I remember right. I could be real wrong. But they intended to make a station in the middle of the ocean.
A big air base? Or
Yeah, I think so. Not so terribly big, but big enough, I guess. And that's what I was told. I had very little authority on these things.
If I'm not mistaken, I think we still have a base in Guam.
Oh yes, I think so too.
Yeah.
But you can imagine the amount of influence I had on that sort of thing, because we had some generals there occasionally, and I had my gold and pink.
By this time, you had made warrant officer?
Yeah, I was in good shape, and I probably enlisted as well. I mean, I probably was a second lieutenant too. But anyhow, we got ready to do that, and then suddenly word came that we would go back to the United States. And so we went, headed back for the United States. Well, we had to take down our gear, you know.
Yeah.
And we loaded up with everything and put it in a LST, and away we went. And we didn't know where we were going exactly. We first of all went to Hawaii, and then they decided they would change the loads around and give us a nice load, and we moved everything that, well, it was just more sensible loading. That's what they were doing. And
So you had got pretty proficient in loading and unloading your equipment.
I was real good at it. It was the best of life.
Well, it seems like you did it an awful lot.
Yeah, no, that's I like to to make jokes occasionally. I wasn't that great at it, but it was pretty good. Nothing would fall apart. and we got it mixed. The stuff we loaded, came from. Now I think I've got a better line on this. We went to Guam. That's right. And then, all right, and then we got. I'm just about running crazy because I can't quite get all the things figured.
Well, that's okay. If I can remember, you said you were coming back. You came back to the States. You were coming back to the States.
Yeah. Well, this thing finally, we got people sorted out that way, and got to the United States. That was okay, and that was a pretty fairly decent operation, I think. Well, anyhow, we did one operation one way and one another. I guess one of them, we had to load the ship pretty carefully, and we finally went around by the Panama Canal and came down to the Big Dismal Swamp. I keep saying Big Dismal Swamp Hotel, but it's not. It's a Big Dismal Swamp waterway, and we cruised down the waterway, and my wife was there. We found out a way to let her know that we were coming there, and I had a few men on board who were making sure things worked out all right, and we got her working. And later on, I went to China.
Yeah, you mentioned that in 1948, you went to China for a short period of time.
Yeah, that's right. About half a year, something like that, half a year. And that was that loaded. They wanted to close that base in Tsingtao, China, and when they closed that, they wanted to carry stuff which mystified me. They carried everything, mostly a heavy load of cement, which we brilliantly decided we would put them all on the lower holds, see, and we did that, and everything worked out pretty well, except, boy, was that a mess.
Really?
Oh, big batches of cement, and they break bags, every now and then. Men moving back and forth. We just had a ring of Chinese going on, and they would go down there, and nobody cared whether they broke them up much or not. There was no enforcement of it if they were. And we got her loaded, and then it was the first day of the new year. The day that we were ready to go, it was the first day of the new year.
When you were leaving China?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was what they call a victory ship. It's not a it was a victory ship, and it could move. I think they told me that they were moving 21 knots usually.
I think you said you were moving a lot faster. This ship was moving faster than the other ships you were on.
Yeah, that was about. Well, that would be about at least 2 times, and probably more, of most of the ships that were coming back to the United States.
Yeah.
And we whipped over across. We had another. Yeah. we had another big batch of stuff to move, and of course we had concrete or cement and PX stuff.
A lot of stuff on the PX.
Yeah, very breakable. See, you can imagine the two of those together were somehow not compatible. And we treated it carefully, and it really brought most of it through without any trouble. It was amazing.
And you brought this all back to the United States?
Yes, we brought that to Hawaii, too, and they took some of it and gave us some of it. I don't know why that worked, but it worked. They had some officers who were very brilliant at things. And then we got her in that ship, and away we went. And didn't lose anything once we got it in the ship.
And you came back to the West Coast?
No, we went. That was the one we finally made from China right to.
Is that when you came right back to Norfolk, Virginia?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because that was pretty close to, well, it was actually you said in January of 1949.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we got back early on in that, I don't know, I don't remember, January or something like that, that we got back to Edenton. And we stayed there, and they sent us a guy, well, I don't know, he's probably indigenous. They decided they would build a permanent base, and I never saw whether they did it or not. But they brought a man equipped with concrete and all that stuff, and he laid out how they're going to have all that stuff laid out.
This is in Edenton?
Yeah, it was in Edenton.
Edenton?
Yeah, and I expect he got his higher authority from somebody else. I never knew. He just knew what he was doing. You could tell he was pretty sharp.
Yeah.
And that was the last we had anymore. Decided to leave the Corps, and so.
This is when you decided to leave the Corps?
Yeah, coming home on a ship, I made up my mind. Boy, this is too long a time to be, and so I got got everything that we needed, and there were I had four men in the whole, and the rest of it all ships people. And it was good. They fed us well and did us everything that they could. And it was fun going down that big Dismal Swamp Canal. That was a real
Really?
Oh yeah, it's a big deal. And we got her in there, and stayed there for a few months, a couple months, and resigned.
That was in June 1949.
Yeah.
You had a 7-year career.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, you came out, you made second lieutenant in there somewhere. We don't know exactly
I don't know exactly when that was, but it was good. It was good. And I guess if my wife hadn't been so adamant about it, I would have stayed in anyhow. She was really not for it, boy.
Well, it had to be hard on her.
Yeah, it was tough.
You know.
But we got that.
You were discharged from Cherry Point, or was it at Edenton you were discharged from?
Either one. I don't remember for sure which one it was. I guess Cherry Point.
Yeah. Do you have any memories of the day, okay, you got your discharge? Do you have any memories
No.
of that day, how you felt?
Oh, as far as feeling good, I was very, of 2 or 3 or so minds at least, and I hated to leave. But it just decided, my wife and I both decided that we were going to have to leave, And that's what we did. And I never looked back, and literally or figuratively.
You did mention to me there one time while we were talking that you were getting homesick for the Marine Corps right away.
Oh yeah, it was tough. It was very tough, and it turned out all right. It was tough to get places to stay. That was the trouble with so many of the.
I mean, while you were in the military.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they. One of the things they told me, they asked me to come to Washington, and so I flew up there. One of our planes flew up there, and they could have done it in a letter, but the guy said, "Well, what was the thing that caused you to leave?" He said, "We're short on lower rated
Officers?
Officers." And I told him, "Well, if you got places for men to live, and their families to live, why, it'd be a big help." Well, now 25, 30 years have gone by, and they do have quite a few.
Yes, they have quite the housing.
Yeah.
Throughout the world, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Families.
Yeah, and that was good, but you couldn't count on them to do that, and so we decided to get out. Yeah, and I would like to have done it in many respects. It was fun.
Now, was it hard? Well, you did say it was hard. Hard to, you got out, but was it hard to adjust back to the civilian life itself?
In a way, I guess it was. You might keep this one secret, see? But
Right.
Well,
you got to tell it.
Yeah, yeah. Don't. I made nothing but A's in the whole time I was in college. And then I got, well, I'm a member of the National Academy of Engineering too. There are only a few guys.
Oh, you went to college. We're
Yeah.
sort of getting ahead of you, so.
Yeah.
You went to college right after the military, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I was in school in the week.
Yeah, I was going to say, you didn't have much time off.
No, I should say not.
And then you finished up your college career with 3 years down at
Raleigh.
Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina State.
Yeah.
That was a big deal, and it was good.
Yeah. Did you take advantage of the GI Bill? Which,
Oh,
yes,
sure.
You did. That's what got you through to college.
Yeah.
What did you do for a living?
I was an electrical engineer, and it lived. I went as far as I really wanted to go in the member
In the GE?
yeah,
In the electrical?
yeah, and they had management stuff, and I suppose I kept fighting it down because I didn't care much for management. A lot more fun getting a hold of this stuff. And
You like the hands-on more than the...
Oh, yeah.
How many years did you have with the GE?
7.
GE, when you were into working for the General Electric. How many years? Do you remember how many years you worked for the General Electric?
Yeah, altogether it's 7.
32.
Oh, 32.
7 was the military.
Yeah, 30. Yeah, the way that worked out. Yeah, the way they've got that should be straight, is that he had 32 years of engineering work, but and part of that was with GE all the time.
Yeah.
And in fact, most of it was with GE. So I guess that's fair enough. It came kind of shocking. I was not a GE employee, for instance, for a lot of that. I was working for. Well, still, it was. You probably got it as right as I got it.
Now, did you marry and have children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had four kids.
You had four children.
Yeah.
2 boys, 2 girls.
Yeah.
Did you keep in touch with any of your buddies?
A few.
Or attend? Yeah.
A few. One guy that was he and his wife were married just the same time as my wife and I, and we followed him, and I would still be corresponding with him, but he and his wife both died before.
So you corresponded with them all those years.
Right. Yeah, we always did. And then we had a couple more friends. That were in the same category of officers and enlisted. You know, you didn't want to get too far. First, you don't know what you're doing anymore. And this was good. It was good to be.
Now, did you get? I know you said you kept in. You corresponded with them. Did you ever get to visit with the veterans, the fellows you were in?
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that one time you got to see one of them anyway.
Yeah. Well, we used to visit with quite a few guys. Yeah, and well, remember when the World's Fair was at New York, we spent a week or so there going to the World's Fair with them.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh.
And it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of people that we knew, and I still look through some correspondence of different guys who were in the military, and they came out, and some of them most of them excellent people.
Yeah.
They're just excellent all the way.
Well, it's nice just to know that,
Yeah. They're a good place to be.
Now, did you join any veterans organizations once you got out of the military?
No, I didn't, and I don't know why, but I never did. One reason for it, I guess. Some organizations, the engineering world has some organizations that are very tight organizations, and this one I was mentioning, they have a national or international organization, and not very many people. And so it's a real honor to belong to. And so that gets to be kind of the Marine Corps is an honor to belong to that too.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason is that you have to pay more dues. I don't know.
Let me ask you, do you feel that your military experience had a positive or negative effect on your life?
Positive. Positive, by all means. Yeah. And that and my wife were two biggest
influences on your...
Yeah. And
your wife had a big influence.
And they were very close together, so that's why it was so hard to...
No, your wife's a wonderful woman. I mean, talking with her and everything else, she helped us out with this.
Yeah, she's a big help. Yeah. Almost everything she does.
We have a couple of photographs that you said you'd like us to take a look at.
Okay.
And if we can get them up on the screen,
well,
we can...
I'm rarely this successful, although...
oh, you're successful. You did a wonderful...
Putting guys in sleeping, though. Well, if you guys are satisfied, I surely am.
Yeah, I'd like to, if we could see these photographs. Gene, this photograph here, you said was sent to you by a friend?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly who it was, but it's somebody said you ought to get into aviation or something like that.
Well, the photograph, I know he mentioned it, and I have seen Mr. General Westmoreland, and you are a spitting image
Yeah.
of that photograph of General Westmoreland.
Yeah.
I think that's what he said in his little note that he sent you.
Yeah,
Your
whoever sent that note said he no doubt about it.
Yeah, you are a spitting image of him. So I just thought that was
Yeah.
a nice photograph to show.
Sure. Yeah. He just had a.
And this one here, you want to explain?
Yeah, that's just some of the people back in Camp Pendleton, I guess. Yeah, there's a colonel over on this side, and I don't know quite what the purpose of that picture was, but it was everybody except the real heavy brass, I guess. I don't know who else.
Now you are the second from the left, the taller
Yeah,
of the two.
that is correct. And our commanding officer was the third. There's me, and then there's some bag or some kind, and then it looks like our Jade, or Mojit. He's our commanding officer.
Now was he a general?
He's a major.
The major. Now the one in front of him, is that the general that was reviewing?
I don't think he is there. I don't think he's seen on any of those pictures. I can't be sure, but I don't think so.
Okay, but I know you said you liked this photograph and you wanted to.
Yeah, this man on this end, he was a splendid man, I thought. He was a major, a colonel, and he'd been down there, and he came. I asked him if he'd like to see himself in a picture, and he thought so, and so he gave me a picture.
That's a nice photograph. It's a nice memory too.
Yeah.
Gene, I want to thank you for the time you spent telling me your story.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the service that you did for your country.
Well, thank you for the same, and you did a great job both with this and everything else you do, I think.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.